So I would describe myself as a digital artist, I think primarily, but now obviously I'm starting to wade into the sort of traditional world and sort of physical world more now, so it's getting a bit sort of murkier. But yeah, I would say I am an artist who is trying to sort of like bridge these two worlds. So for a long time, I didn't really sort of consider myself an artist just because the primary sort of mode for making a living was design work, where I was basically someone who people hired to solve problems. And that's my sort of definition of a designer versus an artist. Now, I just make whatever the hell I want and pray to God somebody wants to pay money for that. That to me is like an artist and something, the distinction that I sort of make there. Yeah, and I think I can see how obviously it would be easy to sort of see that. But again, yeah, to your point, I've been doing this for 20 years and sort of slowly gaining, a following over that time. And the piece that sold at Christie's certainly was not made overnight. It literally took me 13 years to make. But again, people are sort of there's this to the traditional art world and the sort of like, media at large, I did kind of come out of nowhere. But I think that sort of downplays the social media aspect of what happened with me and focuses just on the sort of NFT kind of aspect. And I think the social media and sort of building up a following of millions of people over the preceding decade, that's what allowed me, once this NFT technology came along, to do something like this, because there was a sort of like massive audience that I built up. And I think that's something that people maybe don't really understand with NFTs is this is not some magic bullet where it's just suddenly you're just going to start selling stuff. If you do not have a sort of like built-in audience and you have not built a community around your work, then it is going to be very hard to sell stuff. NFTs, canvas, photography, sculpture, whatever. So it's not like you just like magically go out and buy a canvas and then all of a sudden, whoa, sales are flying. No, you gotta like build an audience. And that's what I did. And it had nothing to do with sales for, the first 20 years here. And so I think it's really just about making that emotional connection with people. And if people don't have an emotional connection to your work, I'm sorry, they're just not going to buy it. Like that's all it is. So I started going by the moniker Beeple in 2003, and it's this like little furry, like Ewok looking like toy from the 80s that kind of like beeps. You could still buy them on eBay, but I have to say my brother's trying pretty hard to own all of them in the world, so. I do probably. I mean, I've sort of given them out as gifts over the years because for a long time they were like $15. You could just buy them. Nobody really wanted them, and there would always be like maybe 2 or 3 of them on eBay. Now they're a couple $100, and they're a little bit harder to sort of like come by. But I don't know if I have that original one. Yeah, I think that was sort of the like common kind of like misconception, and I had a lot of people coming to me and be like, "You can't give this stuff away. Nobody will ever pay for your work if you just give it away." That did not turn out to be true. And I knew it was never true. Because at the end of the day, what you're competing for with the internet and in today's sort of society, the biggest thing you're competing for first is people's attention. And it is very hard to get their attention. So you need to do anything you can do to sort of like get their I mean, don't do gross shit, but you need to do anything you can do that's not gross. to get their attention. And so I think being able to sort of provide extra value like this, especially with something like project files, which are literally after you render out the project, are completely useless to you. And so being able to sort of just, give back to people without sort of any expectation, I think is a hugely sort of just a way that you can build an audience, much quicker and sort of, show that you are providing value without just sort of like, if the first thing you come to them and be like, hey, want to buy my shit? It's like, no, you've started off on probably the not right foot. Yeah, that was definitely an eye-opening moment. It was definitely something that I was just putting these things out there into a void, and it was very much something like, I was always like, man, if I saw one of these clips one day, like, that would be the thing. Like, what if I was in a club and they just started playing one of my clips? And, like, that was something that was literally, like, in my mind, like, 20 years away. And then it happened after 1 year on the other side of the world, and it was like, oh my God, what the fuck? And, like, yeah. No, it was like, I love making these clips. I've been making them already for years. Like, I'd been making sort of these abstract loops almost for, probably 10 years at that point, but not really connecting them to, like, VJing. It was just like, these are just small little experimental, like, clips that I'm making. There's no purpose for them. I love making them. It's learning the software. They look cool to me. I don't really have a use for these. And then sort of the VJing thing kind of came along, and it's like, well, all these little weird abstract clips I've made, those kind of could be used for this. And it's like, I don't want a VJ. I have no interest in trying to move up the VJ world and, travel constantly, because, again, I was sort of starting a family and getting, married and stuff. And so it's like, if somebody else can use these, fuck yeah, like, what the hell? Like, that's win-win for everybody. So yeah, it was never, and people were selling them, and I was always kind of like, I don't think this is something you sell. This is something you give away, but. It has in a way, but it's sort of, I think what makes it tough is it's sort of like, things were kind of happening, it's sort of a, pace, and then it was like everything just got bumped up to a new pace, and then it just kind of stayed at that pace. Like, it wasn't like, whoa, we had this big thing, and then it kind of came back down to normal. It was like, boom, it just, like, shot up to that, and then just, like, stayed at that, because, like, NFTs have not gone away, and there's now this sort of, like, shorthand that if you've heard of just this thing, then it's like, then there's probably a good chance you've heard of me too. And so it's definitely, sort of something that's still like, it's not, I'm in the fucking airport and somebody comes up to me and wants to take, like, a fucking selfie. Like, that was not happening before. And so it's a different level of sort of, like, attention that it's still, like, kind of getting used to, but it's also been just so exciting and something that I just feel so blessed and, like, fortunate to be in this position, because I do think there was certainly a degree of luck into it. Yes, I put in the time, but there was certainly a degree of luck, because I did not invent NFTs. And I wasn't even that early to them, to be quite honest. I mean, there have been people who had been working in them for years before this. So, yeah, it's something that I've processed, but I've also kind of, like, to some degree, just sort of made peace with the fact that I'll never kind of fully process it, I don't think, just because it's just one of those bizarre things. It's just, like, I'm still just, like, that just does not seem like that happened. In 2019, I did kind of a gallery show in Toronto. It wasn't really at a gallery. It was at, like, this space. So it was more of just kind of like an exhibition. And at that show, the people who were sort of helping me organize it were like, oh, we should put a drawing that you like, you should do a drawing, and we'll just put, like, just a ridiculous amount of money on, a ridiculous price on this, and we know nobody's going to buy it, but it's just one of these funny things where we put a ridiculous price on this. And so I'm like, okay, let's do that. And so we put that at $14,000, and nobody bought it. And I also had prints there that were $1,000. Nobody bought those. And yeah, the most out of that sale, the most anybody bought were the $100. There was $100 prints there. But I think I wasn't trying to sell prints or trying to sell my art like this, because even I wasn't thinking of it like this. I wasn't thinking about it in a sort of scarcity collecting mindset. And so, yeah, it's definitely been a massive shift. But it's been so cool to see other people. That applies to not just me. That applies to probably the majority of digital artists, to be quite honest. I would be surprised if there was almost any digital artist that had sold work for more than $1,000. I would say there's almost none. And so that is something that across the board you're seeing people that it's like, well, I never fucking sold shit, and then they sell something for, 50, 70, whatever, like, huge sums of money. Yeah, I think when people are pushing back on something that they could easily also just ignore, it's very odd that it's like, I don't know how you could possibly be so worked up over something. You could just turn your head, and now you're not thinking about it. But yeah, I think it's one of these things where I think there's a huge amount of sort of like benefits from this. Even in the traditional art world, I look at sort of forgeries and kind of people trying to prove ownership of something. That's something, even with paintings, you could very easily do. Here's a painting. Here's the NFT associated with it. You don't have both. You don't have the fucking painting. Nobody's, I pulled this painting out of I found this. And it's like, no. Does it have the fucking thing? Does it not have the thing? And so I think you will see that very much just integrated into, a lot of physical artwork too. And I think as time goes on, you're just going to see more use case of this and more sort of like things and things totally unrelated to art. And I think people will sort of get it, because I do have a lot of sort of understanding and empathy for people who are like, what the fuck, and just don't get it, because it is fundamentally a different way of thinking about computers than we've thought for the last 20 years. A file is a copy of a copy of a copy. There's no original. It's just, what are you talking about? It's just, there's no owner. Those are not things we ever thought about with computers. And so I totally get how this is going to take a little while. And it's only been 1 year, and I feel like it's gone way faster than I thought. But I think as people find their own sort of entry point into NFTs and sort of the concept of digital ownership, virtual ownership, I think you'll just see those arguments just kind of fade away. It definitely had a big impact on me, because a majority, I would say, of the work that I was doing at that time in terms of client work was concert visuals. I was actually, right when that happened, working on a Justin Bieber, like, fucking stadium tour shit that was supposed to launch in May. And, it was this massive, it wasn't just me, it was tons of people or whatever, but massive project, and so it was like, that's gone. And so it very much sort of affected the work that I was doing. I mean, you saw that across the board with so many projects getting canceled. And I think this was a massive factor in how fast the adoption of this happened. I absolutely think it would have happened eventually, but I think it might have taken 5 more years. And I think it could have been much more of a slow sort of like progression. But yeah, everybody was home and they were, had nothing to do but time. And so I think that was a huge piece of it.